Hi, I'm Clint, and welcome to Swatch's Livestream number 77. And we also are being joined by Anna. Say hi.
Hi everyone.
Oh, well, you know what helps? Uh, make sure that Anna's unmuted. Okay.
Again.
Okay.
Hi
All right,
everyone.
looks good. So, thank you everybody for joining. This episode, we're going to be reviewing the finals for the art challenge. She and I will be giving feedback to those who are entering their finals and trying to help you guys out just where to go with your image. And we're going to be talking about whatever topics comes up based on the images that we have received. Now, we're also going to be going through some announcements of other things going on in this Watches community, and then we'll jump into the artwork. So let's take a look at the announcements and get through those real quick. I need to switch over to my screen. Here we go. Now, Anna is joining us just with audio, so if you don't see her picture moving, that's because it's just a picture, it's not live video.
I couldn't smile like that for so long.
Yeah, she plays like a mannequin so well. It's incredible. Okay, I don't think I need OBS right there. Cool. And of course, guys, if you have questions and you're joining in live, then feel free to drop those in the comments. We will try to keep an eye on those and answer those during the course of the program if we can, and certainly if they're relevant. So, as you can see here, number one guest, Anna's with us. Number two, I have a quick call for art submissions for the materials course. All the work has been done. I'm currently putting together a page and marketing stuff for the materials course so I can release that. There was one thing I forgot to do, which was make a before and after video that examples how to implement the things that we talk about in the course. So it actually showing me opening up some artwork and doing basically paint overs, focusing on how to improve the materials by implementing the processes and techniques in the course. You can find a post about this on the Swatches group, swatches.group. We'll send you to the Facebook group. And then I have a post out there asking for art submissions. If you have some art that you'd be interested in having in that, and if your art is in the video, you will receive a copy of the video. Essentially, these are paint overs on this topic. They will be included for the materials course at different tiers in the materials course. So they have to be free from any kind of copyright issues. This can't be something that's owned by somebody else. It can't be a copyright character or anything like that. I've got a couple of submissions that are good, but I am looking for some art that maybe has some other materials. It's easy to find submissions that cover skin and metal because there's a bunch of people that do fantasy stuff and people in armor. But some of the other things like glass and crystal, that's a little harder. I don't get submissions on them as much. Number three is the Twitch channel. Now, you've been joining me out there quite a bit, haven't you, Anna?
Yes, it was
Yes.
very entertaining and very, very educative.
Yeah, we're having fun out there. I have been streaming the last 2 weeks, Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to about noon Central Standard Time. We start the stream off with just some warm ups, and then we do basically a sort of lesson, like a 30, 45 minute simple sort of drawing lesson. And this is in traditional media. I'm not doing this digitally right now. Then I move into some of my own practices, and I'm currently working on direct drawing. So it's pen drawing a subject with no pre-sketching. I just think it's a really cool skill set, and it's one that I'm enjoying practicing. So come out there, join me out on the Twitch channel. It's just streaming for free, and you can chill with me or join in for the art lesson in the mornings. Have you actually been drawing along with me, Anna?
To be honest, I was probably playing games. By the way, can you hear my voice a little bit? People saying chat, I'm very low again.
Well, we have had some people joining along, and they've been posting this stuff out on the group, and it's been good to see those, and it's encouraging to see that. So, if you need to just carve out a little time, join us out there and get your sketching in for the day. Number 4, the new art challenge. Anytime we wrap up one challenge, we kick off a new challenge. And these challenges are brought to you by Anna. She thought up a couple, and she talked to some of the other members and got ideas from them. So we will do a review of what that new challenge will be right now before we get into the review of the current challenge finals. Also, before I forget, if you like the stream, if you like the community, the feedback you find helpful, just leave a like on the video. Also, leave a comment of anything that stood out to you or what you might want to see in an upcoming challenge. I do read all the comments, and I do keep those in mind. If you have a good idea, I will add it to my list. So,
Put up my voice a little bit. People say they barely can hear me.
oh, that is the wrong window. Hang on. No, I can't. I think you should just shout. I'm pretty sure that's the solution.
I try. Get closer to my laptop. I hope it helps.
Okay, set you up a good deal right there. That should fix it. Let us know in the chat if that audio's high, low, or whatever, or if that seems about right. Okay. So the challenge outline, right here. Let me pull this up a little so you can see it all. Alright, this is a dual challenge. We're doing dual challenges as standard now. It gives you the choice between 2 different subject matters. And this is the Spring Dragon's Den. Those are separate, Spring and Dragon's Den. You can choose either Spring or Dragon's Den challenge. Both are full color illustrations. Spring. As the world comes back alive after winter, depict a character who embodies spring. This could be a waking dryad with blossoms in her hair, a brightly colored fairy, or maybe a child picking flowers. You don't have to choose between those 3. Those are just to give you ideas. Image can be a singular character or a character in a scene. Whichever direction you choose, it should be happy, colorful, and tied to nature. When applicable, just a reminder for you who are getting in the challenge, have references for, on this image, the character's pose, the expression, if applicable, like if they're not facing you, obviously you don't need an expression reference. Have something for the environment, if there is an environment, as well as artistic style or direction, kind of some sort of inspiration piece like that, and something for the lighting and colors. Now, those might be the same, or they could be separate. But make sure you have one for each of those if you have those things going on in the scene. Second option, Dragon's Den. Depict a meeting between a human character and a dragon in its den. You can make a scene about confrontation. Battle is ensuing. Negotiation. Is he trying to barter for his life against the dragon's hunger? Or maybe the dragon is enslaved, a la Harry Potter and the Dragon Under Gringotts. The dragon should be large and fearsome. Look to convey the scale difference, and remember to add the narrative with the environment. You can add to the world and kind of the situation. You can add to the history of what's going on with the environment. That is almost a character in itself. In this image, when applicable, have a reference for the human's pose and expression, as well as the kind of environment. Does it have to be a perfect reference? No. But if you have, say, a cave, at least a photo of a cave in the general layout is going to be very helpful. Dragon's head. Now, the dragon's head can be really tricky. And one of the things that you could consider is something like this. Now, I'm out here at sketchfab.com, and I just searched for dragon. And they've had 3D models out here that you can just pull up. Now, these are purchasable to use in various programs, but you could also just use them as quick reference, and you can just move these all around. I've used this, not this particular one, but I have found this very useful in a recent commission that I did. And you can change, of course, the design of the dragon on that sort of thing. but there are really complex curves in the way the mouth opens and all this stuff that can be hard to think through and draw. And if you have just a basic reference like this for the angle, then that can work. Other things you can look for is maybe a 3D model or even a physical figurine of like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, some sort of dinosaur can be helpful along that lines as well. Make sure you have reference to wings. That's something that people get off a lot, and they just try to draw it, and it doesn't usually come out right. So, Anna, would you agree that having good references generally improves the image?
100%. 100%. I actually, when I started with art, I never used reference because I felt like it was like stealing from somebody else or from a photo. I always thought if I want to paint a dog, I need to know how to paint a dog, otherwise I'm a bad artist.
Yeah.
But it helps you, and it gives you the right direction for lighting, for proportions, for everything. You can find reference for everything, and I think that's a very, very important part.
Yeah, don't get sucked into that. It's an easy mentality to get pulled into, thinking that somehow reference is cheating. And it can get a little that way if you're copying it verbatim, like exact copy. But what you need to do as the artist is have your image direction set, and then go find the references. So work up your basic sketches of what your composition is going to be, what the basic poses are going to be. Even if you can't get them real accurate, then go find references to supplement that, to make it more realistic. What you want is for the references to help drive the realism, but not drive the image direction. Your concept should drive the image direction. Important difference there. So as far as how do you get into the challenge, these are limited slots. We used to have it completely open, but we got too many submissions to ever review. So there will be 12 digital tickets, e-tickets, that will go on sale at the Swatches store tomorrow. And I release them in 6 tickets in the morning and 6 tickets at night for people around the world have a better chance to get it when they're actually awake. The tickets are $20 and you get feedback per 2 weeks, because you have 2 weeks to send in a concept/sketch, and then we'll do a live stream review, give you feedback on that, and then you have 2 more weeks to submit in the final, and then we'll have a live stream feedback on that one as well. And just to be clear, you own all the images. We don't own anything. We're just looking at it and trying to give you some tips. It's your image, and if you want to go off and do something else with it, add it to your portfolio, print it in a book, that is entirely up to you. The entire idea behind the challenge is to give you guys a better idea of what it's like to work on a real project, on a client commissioned project, where you have to follow a deadline and a reasonable deadline, and where you're having to do somebody else's idea of a scene. And that's a critical difference between you just doing your own kind of art all the time, where you are the one determining what is right and what is wrong and what the subject matter is going to be. Okay, I think that probably covers it. I will also be supplying some reference images with the outline here. So when you go out to buy the e-ticket, which is swatchesart.com, it will be put on the Gumroad store out there. There will be limited to 12 of them. It will have this outline right here, as well as some reference images and a template for you to throw your reference images with your concept all together if you're working in Photoshop. Did I miss anything there? Anything come to your mind or comments on that?
Yeah, only the comment, because we already had the case that some people skipped the sketching and just submitted the final. If you go for a ticket and you take part in the challenge, make sure to make use of everything that this challenge offers you. And this means the sketching phase as well. This means the value studies, the color studies, everything you put in there. Clint can give you help and can give you support and tell you what you have to change. And if you don't hand it in, he can't help you, and I think it's
Yeah.
important.
So I have spots there for value studies and color studies. Those aren't for me, those are for you. I'm not doing this for me, right? You get out what you're willing to put in. I put those there because you are going to do a better image if you do value studies. You are going to do a better image if you do more than one concept sketch. So I have multiple spots for concept sketches so that you get used to knowing that's how you do good images. You go through all of these steps. You make sure you fill in all of their reference spots for all of the major elements that you need. This is how you improve your art. So take the time and go through it. Now, if you can't submit, hey, we understand. If it's a family emergency, things happen, life happens. But if you aren't really constrained by some sort of emergency, make the effort. And also remember, it doesn't have to be great to be submitted. You don't even have to like it to be submitted. Because this is just a learning project, right? This isn't a real project. So if it works out, great. If it doesn't, who cares? Right? There's nothing on the line here other than the chance to learn something. My brother's got a great quote. He says, I think it's from Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Cry in the dojo, laugh on the battlefield. This is the dojo. This is where you practice your martial arts, right? It's okay to cry in the dojo. That's when you're working hard. But then if you do it here, then you don't have to do it out on the battlefield where it really matters. So, okay, we need to jump to it. I think we just need to open these up and start going through it. So, as usual, we'll be going alphabetically. I'll just open these up. We're going to start with, who are we starting with? Daniel Ruger. He's who came up first. Okay. So. All right, now I've made a couple of marks here of things to go over. But Anna, you've taken a look at these as well. You've put together your own notes. Now, we have chatted a little bit before stream, but I don't really know what her observations are. She doesn't necessarily know what my observations are, so we're going to be going through this together. What were your input here on Daniel Ruger's piece?
Yep. So I think he changed a lot. He went further with the sketch, what I think is a really good thing. He pushed through and made some major changes. And he even added the helmet, he changed the snakes, and I think these were the right decisions for this piece. And what I like the most is the anatomy, the dynamic, and the lighting that he uses here. Things that I would like to see pushed further or improved are the first thing that really first thing that came up to my mind was there is no much space in the helmet for him to breathe air. It is very, very close to his face, where the glass was before, and there's not enough space for him to breathe. I would change the design of that helmet a little bit and to make it more believable. The second thing is the two light sources, the one from the top and from the bottom, are about the same strength. And I would, in his position, I would choose one that is the main source and the other one just, giving a little bit more color and form and things like this. And I was wondering why the background is so bright when we are in space fighting. He has a nice silhouette though. I just think he might even have pulled it off with a dark background. I think it would have worked the same. Yeah, and the last thing is about the snakes themselves. So the one on top has a little bit weird angle to come and bite him. So he's like tipping over, or the one on the left is what the one on biting his arm.
Right.
And the one biting his upper body, I think it is supposed to bite his upper body completely, which is anatomically not doable for that creature. And it looks just like it's like moving up on him. So I don't know whether it was supposed to bite him at this base or it's just laying its head on his chest. So if he was biting, it would have it would not work like that. You cannot chew him up like that. It's too tiny, the head. Yeah, these were my first thoughts on Daniel's piece.
These are good observations. Some of the similar ones that I had. Well, let's talk through those. Some good points here. And several of the things that Anna's talking about and struck me as well. And these are the observations that they aren't critical art technique rendering issues. It isn't, I think the edging on this is a little hard or a little soft. That's like kind of high technique stuff. One of the first things that you want to look for, and can be one of the hardest things to actually notice, is, I'm sure there's a term for it, can't think of it, but it's like basic viewer questions. Basic things that would get a viewer off. That if I looked at it, I'm like Anna, I was thinking like, why is this snake's head upside down?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't really imagine a snake, even an alien snake, striking upside down. That seemed it just catches me off as a viewer. And things that sort of create that visual hiccup, we've got to deal with those, right? And that we've got to take care of that. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter how good and fancy we get with anything else in the scene. But sort of overarching all of that is, I want to give you a thumbs up, like props on the change that you made from the concept. There's honestly a lot of artists that wouldn't even have bothered, right? Because your other concept, you were going in a completely different direction with it. And I gave you a bit of a hard time about it. And a lot of people would have just said, well, forget that. And they wouldn't have even sent in anything else. They wouldn't have gone back to the board. So I want to just say, that's good, man. You took good feedback. You didn't take it hard. You went back to the board and you did what was necessary. And that is an excellent example of one of the reasons that you are likely to make it in this industry.
Yeah.
Because if you can't take that kind of feedback, if you can't learn from, I wouldn't say mistakes, then you're not likely to be able to make it. So I want that on top. So yeah, the snake, I would just flip it right side up. And I'm with Anna as well. The one on his chest, like there's no way that his jaw, again, this is sort of just the basic logic, viewer logic. As big as his jaw is, he can't get that around the backside of the dude. So I would either need to make it much more clear that his jaw is there, invisible, and that it's just sliding up around him, or we need to back it off so it's just catching the edge of his rib cage and biting there and not all the way around his entire body. Again, good observation with the helmet. Yeah, that's a little too tight. Like he wouldn't be able to, it'd be against his nose, right? We just need to make that helmet a little roomier or change the shape of it. Or if you want to ditch the helmet face part and maybe make it some sort of almost like respirator piece that just goes over the mouth. Of course, you don't get to see the action in the mouth, but if you're trying to get the helmet off of his head and give you another option. Lighting wise, yeah, I was kind of wondering the same thing, Anna. The silhouette is reading, and you can have that bright light in the background, but I think if you have that bright light, you don't really want as bright of a light on the top of his arms and on his face. Because generally you don't want to put light things against light things. You want to put light things against dark things. So you could even have the background getting dark as it goes up, and so that you have light against dark on those items, which we might be able to do just a really quick sort of example of that. That you can have this bright light even kind of shining off of this helmet, but you could have a darker background behind it. Then have him getting darker as it goes down, but you have the brighter light, kind of what you have it as it goes down. So they're going in reverse, right? He's essentially getting lighter as he goes up, and the background is essentially getting lighter as it goes down. And so the two gradients play off of each other. You would have that option to consider. The eyes also took me a little bit off. When you make anything straight white or straight black, it just makes it flat. So I don't know if the eyes are just white or if they're actually glowing. If they are glowing, we could think about putting some sort of kind of mid-tone glow with just a little color around their eyes, just to give the idea that it does have a glow to it. It doesn't necessarily need to be lighting up things around it, but just something in between the white eye and the black scales, right? Okay. Sort of small thing. Let's see. Oh, I would recommend, if we are going to go with the helmet, we might just add spacesuit over his chest. You can have the bare shoulder, you can have the bare arms, but I would say if this part could be spacesuit, and it doesn't necessarily need black, that's just what I grabbed right there. I mean, you could have like gray or something and it has some sort of pattern to it, right? It's got this sort of thing going on. I just think that would make a little more sense because he's got just barely any fabric, but his entire helmet's on. So if you sort of had it a bit more like that, I would accept that a little easier. Yeah. This curve, there was just, now we're talking about a little more of just kind of the artistic rendering here, which is this curve with the snake is really sort of odd. There on the left side, it sort of makes this bow shape, double S thing. I just don't really see a snake doing that. And it doesn't keep any kind of line of action. So the simplest thing would be to just have it sort of coming around this way. All right. Then we can probably start adding in, like you have this nice red tone right back there on that edge. And we need to start using that as sort of atmospheric to start adding some difference in that black on the snakes. Because right now, all that black just starts kind of running together, and it's difficult to see any difference between them. Maybe a little more pink to kind of... And then, so like this one here is slightly in front of that one. So maybe I put that on this guy. And so again, you're trying to put like a slight light and dark pattern to create depth to it. And I do the same thing over here. Again, just trying to create a little depth to this. And then it allows maybe this guy to go more like that. And see, if that's all black, then it doesn't have much visual dynamics to it. Your eye doesn't travel. Gradients allow your eye to travel. It encourages your eye to travel from one end to the other end of the gradient. But flat tones just sort of stop the eye and make it feel flat. So having a couple of gradients like that. And here, your eye starts moving around the scene a little more, instead of just being block shapes. The eyes on this guy, a couple of the things on the silhouette and stuff here, with the way that he's hitting that snake, you're really wanting to create the force going in a unified direction, right? Because he's impacting it in a unified direction. And you have the force going out equally on both sides with both eyeballs coming out. Okay, one eyeball sort of popping out, I get it, but it's not going to be both directions. So I'd probably take out that one on that left side, right? And then also the way that this, I guess it's a fang on the top, then the tongue curl up. It took me a second just to realize, because it's almost like two horns coming up, and they create this sort of perfect arch right there. So I think I would take that tongue out of that position, then maybe have the tongue sort of lolling behind it. Because if you hit something, everything wants to remain static where it was. And then you force it over. And you think about, like, if it had hair, right? The tongue is behaving like hair. Hair is going to trail behind you wherever you were and then catch up to you. And so the tongue and any moisture and blood is going to do that sort of thing. So that tongue is going to be like, blah. And the eye is almost wanting to do that too. So the way that he impacts it, forcing the eye out the other side, it's kind of like one of those, maybe. So yeah, it's something to think about. If you do go with the dark background, you could really push the light a lot more on the top. If you want to remain with the light background, then I would consider toning this down and going with Anna's direction, which is probably even shading this top part down a little bit to unify that silhouette. What do you think? And then maybe ramping up that lower light?
Yeah, that could be working. Also, when you look at his reference that he did with the 3D model, it looks a little bit like he used a low light coming a little bit from the left.
Mm-hmm.
So if he uses more of the lower light, it could be, for example, the light of his shuttle or whatever.
Yeah.
So we have a reason for a light source to be there. So if there's just a beam suddenly out of nowhere, it might be okay, but maybe it's cooler to have something that is more understandable. So why is the light there? So maybe a lower light can help with that. I also like the atmosphere it creates, because if you have a little bit more the face lit from below, it's also a little bit more of a creepy situation, something that is for us, because we are used to the light that's coming from above, and then you have something that's light from underneath. It's already adding this little bit horrific and horror
unnatural
feeling to it. Yeah. So
you could consider kind of doing this way, and you're just really playing up the darker feel of that top light. And this is actually one of those things that's more advanced. Artists are really used to always using a top light. And as you get better with your art and you think more about lighting, you realize that's not always the solution. And it doesn't necessarily even need to be the default. So the lighting really needs to be directed by what is this scene about? What is the mood trying to achieve? Okay, well, Daniel, hopefully you have found that one useful. It's a cool scene, great progress. When you implement whatever ideas here that you like, post it on the group, and I'd like to see what you do with it. Next up, we have Andy C with his Swamp Shoppe. We have some notes here from Andy C. So we'll read those first. It says, "Thanks for the last credit." I'm sure Andy talks like this. I'm for sure. "I tried to exaggerate my shapes to match the whale style closer, but still feel my design is missing the appeal that WoW has." Well, they have worked on that style for a while, so we understand. "You are very accurate last week in identifying my struggle with getting a concept that I was happy with. I really struggle with the concept stage, especially designing props and architecture that need to be fully designed." Well,
you
not the
sound
only one.
a little bit like a
I
drunk
find
Scottish.
myself thumbnailing a lot, but still feel my designs are generic. That is my Scottish pirate, by the way. If you like that, give that a thumbs up.
The Scottish drunken pirate.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, they're up here. I do appreciate that you have put in the original sketch from 2 weeks ago. This is what he sent in. And we talked about mainly how he needed to exaggerate a lot of the forms in order to get more of a Warcraft. You had even talked about that, Anna, didn't you? So, like, Warcraft had a very unique way of using shapes, and they use a unique color. So we need to talk about the color definitely here, because you've exaggerated a lot of those shapes. Much more Warcraft now. And we also said that the roof was kind of plain, like it just wasn't very interesting. And so you implemented that, and I really like where this is going. What was your impression here?
Yeah, I also thought on the first look at it, it's much more balanced. It doesn't feel like it's tilting to some way. And yeah, I think it's a lot of improvement in that direction. Shall I already carry on, or do you want to get
No,
your
go ahead and hit
comments
your
first?
points. Yeah.
Okay. So I think he could have pushed further the shop. Yeah, the view of a shop. So I still don't get it as a shop. This is the first thing that came to my mind.
Okay.
And I like the start with this little ship part implemented into the house.
Yeah.
Because this is a narrative, like people don't have much in the swamps. They use what they have already, and they had an old ship and made a shop out of that. And I think he could have pushed further into that direction, to be honest. Yeah, so make it a little bit more looking like a shop. Yeah, then some little details, like I don't know what the thing on the top is, the function of it. There is no stairs or steps or anything that's going down to the water. But it's just little things that I had here. And yeah, maybe a little bit of surroundings would have helped to show the people it's a swamp, like maybe a little bit water plants underneath, just to give a little bit more of the feeling of where this house is to be found.
Yeah. Okay. I'm with her. The overall shape's working really great. I'm enjoying the silhouette. It works really well. I do get a pretty good swamp vibe out of it, although the inclusion of some smaller, like secondary swamp plants, flowers, ferns, that sort of thing, maybe growing up along the deck, sort of peeking out, maybe growing on top of some of these big roots. That would be a good option. I am with you on the boat idea that this thing is essentially built out of boat pieces. I really like that. That works well. And to me, when I see that center part, you were saying that, you're not sure the function of it. I took it as this was the main mast of that boat, and he just built his shop around it and used it to help support the roof. But beyond that, where do you go from here? Okay, let me back up a little bit. If I was the art director and you had submitted this in, what I would basically tell you is, I like it. Don't do me another version. Just make it more shop-like. Because it looks like a dwelling, but it doesn't feel like a shop. And that's the same thing that hit her as well. So I would definitely say that that's something that you would move forwards with. So don't worry about redesigning the building. It looks good. Don't worry about trying to change the concept. That looks good. But we need more shopness to it. So that means we maybe need to see a table out here with some items on it. Maybe we see a sign that has the name of the shop on it. Maybe a little staircase or ladder that would kind of make it easier to get into this thing, because we can't see any way that you would actually get into this shop. Maybe putting some lights on inside of this doorway. Make it feel like it's lit and illuminated in there. And then you can see some hints of some items, and you don't have to really render them too much. Just, blocks of color and light, and maybe a furnace burning in the background or something that direction with it, right? Other things. Oh yeah, I really liked this reference up here. This environment reference of this building. This is really cool. And you have a couple of really good references here. So props on finding good references. And you can notice what he did here. Andy didn't copy any of these, but you can tell he was inspired by them and he's added those elements into the scene. So I do want to talk about the Warcraft element because that is something that you brought up and that you were trying to do. I grabbed some Warcraft images just from it was Warcraft / Hearthstone, which is a branch of Warcraft. And so we have a dude over here. We have artwork of Ogrimmar, then the Hearthstone adventure Naxxramas, which I'm not really familiar with, but it was a colorful image. So there's two main things: the colors, the way that they use the colors, and the shapes. And I think implementing the shapes, you've actually got really close. Other things that you would do with the shape is here, I would put in the same sort of effect that they have here, which is the hanging moss off of the int dude in the swamp location. So along the bottom of, wrong way. Along the bottoms of these roots, I would want to see some moss hanging down, doing that sort of thing. Maybe off of the edge of the dock. And it doesn't necessarily be everywhere, but it is something that Warcraft would add in. So I would say that would be an option. Also putting in a feeling of fog. No, we're not doing an entire scene, but you could do fog that sort of, this isn't layered either. Let me see if I can even do that. I'll do like a lighten layer, and then pick some sort of bluish tone. So just sort of getting the bottom of the roots and letting them get lighter and some sort of indication of like a fog that's going across there, right? That sort of feeling. That might help a little bit, give that atmospheric, because that's something else that's pretty big with Warcraft is the gradients of tone. With Warcraft, everything is either getting lighter or darker, warmer or cooler. And they also use big blocks of color. So it's like all of this is that particular kind of green. All of this is violet. It's very clear definitions of colors going on. And everything's getting lighter or darker, not static across the whole thing. And that's a bit more what we have here. Something else we could do is really ramp up some of these colors and the vibrancy. You notice that's one thing. Even about this swamp scene with its int dude, the colors are still really vibrant even though it's like a dark swamp. And nothing's lost to black even though it's a dark swamp. It has excellent colors and pops. Like these flames are really dull. What we can do is come in here and use like some bright orange, a little smaller, and really bring that up, and then you can use your bright yellow and try to give some pop to these things, right? Don't be afraid of extra color in something that's Warcraft driven. You can just come around to all of these and really punch these guys up, especially the flames, because they're literally light sources. So that sort of thing. And we can think about doing something with that doorway. Maybe add in a bit more warmth in some of those windows. Establishing some stuff in here. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, just pushing the color up even more. So I'm going to grab this entire area and I'm going to see about punching this up some. If we just brighten that up, push the contrast up a little bit, automatically, I think that's getting you closer to Warcraft. And you just see that sort of difference with the values and the color tones. You were doing more realistic, but we have to go past that. We have to exaggerate things. What else? Yeah, the levels. Oh, yeah. Well, I think when you start adding some of the shop elements, maybe look for options to put in some bright colors. I would stay in that probably orange-green dynamic, because that is one thing about Warcraft, is that it usually has a very analogous color scheme like you see in this Orgrimmar. It's all within that warm tonal range of like the warm violets. This is within that cool green range, whether it's blue-green or yellow-green. Down here, it's the complementary. It is the bright yellow-green and the violet. So you got the opposites. With you, it looks like you're probably going with like an orange-green combination, somewhere in that range. So can we punch up some areas that maybe have orange paint on them? Maybe the outside of this has like orange paint going across parts of it, in order just to add a bit more color to it, a little more pop to it. And I think it would be almost a shame if the end of this little boat here did not have some sort of figurehead on it. Right? That could be like one of the hallmarks of this little shop. And maybe it's a turtle, right? There's like a turtle figurehead, some little fat turtle, you know, with his little head sticking out there. Because it would just be kind of funny. Then maybe there's a shop sign hanging off of the end, right? And he could be holding it. He could have the little turtle arms out there on the figurehead, like holding the shop sign. You know, something like that. Again, we're going a little funny with it because it's Warcraft. All right, any last thoughts on this one?
Yeah, for the final polish, I'd suggest to, if he plays the game, go into the game and go to the swamp regions. There are also some creatures like frog creatures, I don't know what the names are, and look what they used to build the houses of these. So there, for example, in Warcraft, very often like wood that is bound together by some ropes or something like that. So these details might also help push the Warcraft feeling. Get some items that they have in their shops in Warcraft and put them on there, so people see, oh yeah, I know that item from my game, so I see that this is a Warcraft piece. And yeah, just go there and see what little things they have, how the houses are built, what materials they use, what structures, and implement that for the final polish, and then I think he's good to go.
Yeah, the art director side of this project would also have to note Boggin's not in the scene, and that was noted in the brief, that we needed to see the turtle owner of the shop in the scene. So I would, you know, as an art director, I would send this back to you and just say, hey, real quick, I need you to add Boggin back in with the edits. So, but it's out of my hands now. You do whatever you want with it. Don't save. Okay. Now we have Andrew Doris.
Drew, yes.
It says, not done, still need a lot of time. Took on a more dynamic concept after the last critique. So the last image, I didn't pull up his old concept, but it was a vertical image that had a group of people in the middle and snakes all the way around them. And overall, it wasn't that dynamic because nobody was actually moving. There was no attacking going on. And it was a very high angle. It was kind of like this, but not even that dynamic. So he's done a completely different scene here. This one has a lot more action to it. You put the camera angle, like we kind of talked about, right down in the action. And this one, I think for what the challenge is asking for, is much closer. So that's good. But it also feels like probably because you had to restart with it basically an entirely new direction, that you weren't able to put in as much time to take it to where it needed to go. So the values and particularly the lighting is sort of lagging behind, right? You're trying to play catch up on them. And that's where I think we really need to put the most attention on this one is sort of the lighting and the color and those couple of other things. But you were talking about that a little earlier with me. What was your thoughts on that lighting situation, Anna?
Yeah, so this was also the first thing. The lighting situation is he tries to pull off a little bit of a backlit situation because she has that fire magic, whatever, behind her. And the problem is we want her as a center of a main theme, and to make a character backlit is a very specific decision in art. So I don't know whether you can show the pictures I sent to you, Clint, on stream. So I choose some of the Riot League of Legends artwork that have specific backlit situations. The first one I sent to you, Clint, is the Jinx one.
Yeah, I have Jinx, Tristana, and I forgot the name of the other lady with the blue background, but they're on here.
Yeah, Senna. Okay. So the Jinx one is a really good example because it shows this very hot and warm backlight, and she also has a rim light that makes her really stand out. But on the other hand, she also has this blue light that's much softer coming from the front. So we see the character very well, but she's backlit. So we have a good combination of both of these words combined. So the second one I sent to you is the Senna one, the blue one. And this is a different way of backlighting. They decided to go more for a silhouetted backlighting with a very strong backlight, and she is nearly fully silhouetted in the meaning of that the values on her are very, very close to each other.
Yes.
And we just have a little bit of light coming on top on her face and on her chest a little bit, but the rest is pretty much the same value. And this works in this piece because her silhouette is very readable.
Yes.
And it's very clear. There's not much going on like in his scene with things coming from all directions. And it also implements her travel back from the death. So that's from the dead. So she's coming from another sphere, or I don't know. My English is not sufficient for that. And the Tristana one you also chose?
Yes.
Yeah. And this situation is, I chose this one as well as a reference for you because the background is very light, and light and dark a little bit, but she has a little bit of backlight, but it's just a soft backlight. So the rim light is much softer and much more subtle, while the front light, the cool front light that is opposing again the hot background, is a very strong and coming directly on top of her, so we see her clearly. And yeah, the problem that I saw in his painting is that everything has the same value in his painting. So he tried to do the backlit, but put everything in one value, and so he should decide which of these approaches is the one that I want to pull off here. And I put it on my Photoshop and put it on only black and white, and then I think it's really understandable that the values are very close because the values in the foreground, in the midground, and in the background are basically the same. It's just this really bright magic, and everything else is this grayish mid-tone. And this is the problem in the lighting situation that I have. And I stop now because I talked too long.
No, not too long. That is something that you have to be aware of, and that's probably the major thing going on here. He's like, Certainly this magic. The magic is the brightest, most colorful thing in the scene, and it's not the subject matter. It's not the focal point. And that's always something to be very conscious of, where if possible, you want the subject, in this case the actual person, not the magic the person is wielding, but you want the person themselves to have the brightest light and the brightest colors. So we've got to find a way to deal with that. And then the background itself, we're losing a lot of the depth, right? The snakes in the backgrounds are all sort of running, like she said, in that same value range. So we've got to have some more difference on that. So here is where most of the actual layout and the composition and the pose and stuff are all pretty solid. I would suggest making some changes. We'll look at that in a second. But now is when you need to get real intentional with how you light this. All right? And we've got to kind of put on our cinematographer hat. Cinematographers are the ones that go on set on a movie and they set up the lighting. And the director kind of outlines the mood and what they're looking for in the scene. And then the cinematographer says, okay, well, to get that, I need to have a light here. I need to have a light here. This has got to be dark. This has got to be light. This has got to be warm. This has got to be cool. And that's your job right now. So these are your actors on your set, and we've got to kind of walk through it. Another thing to remember is that there isn't one specific answer to this situation, but there are better and worse answers. Right now, the focus isn't anywhere. Now, one of the things I like about this Tristana piece is that, yeah, it has that front light coming down there, making sure that she's completely readable visually. But it's also just over her face, a little bit over her upper body, and none over her legs. Because they're not important. It doesn't matter. And the same sort of thing here is that her face is really the most important thing. I don't really care about light being on her legs. It doesn't matter that much. The magic, we also need to find a way that the magic is not overpowering the character. Let me switch to a different brush. I don't have opacity on that one. So for like the magic, if you want to keep the same sort of effect, then consider a gradient out of it. So the part right down there by her hand could be the way that it is, but then it gets more diluted and darker as it goes further away from her hand, right? It's trailing off, it's losing its potency, and it's starting to switch tones. So it's less saturated and probably even less opaque. And this ends up helping your eye drift to the more important areas. And the whole thing doesn't have to be the same brilliance. So that sort of change right there can help put our attention back towards the focal area of the scene. All right, okay, cool. Now with the lighting on her, you can choose to play your artistic license in a couple of different directions. You can do like that Jinx lighting there, where you just have this really bright sort of edge light, similar to what you have, but you're going to play it up probably even a little bit more. And then the rest of it is basically going to go into shadow. And we could even look at basically letting the rest of her lower body be silhouetted. But if we do that, then we need to make sure that that background, in this case, look at these, all of these. The background around her legs that are silhouetted is brighter. The background around her legs, which is basically silhouetted, is brighter. The lower body of the top character up here, that's silhouetted, it's lighter behind it. Constantly putting light against dark, light against dark, light against dark. And so down here, we want to add more like atmosphere. so that we can get that lower body to read. Then if it's not reading somewhere, then that's where we use some sort of secondary light, or we use little bits of light from the environment to create some sort of, you know, sheen or something to help tell the reflections some down that way. Again, thinking in terms of gradients. Gradient over the whole character, gradient across the face. The lighting there on the face is going to be important of how you handle that. You can either have the whole thing in shadow, which is sort of what you've got now. Which I'll probably even tie it together even more. You notice that the colors across here are very uniform. I mean, there is tones of color change, but it's basically everything in the shadow is cooler, everything, you know, being lit by the main light is warmer. And they have very controlled colors. Here we have very strong red, very strong blue, and fairly strong, like, you know, Caucasian sandy skin. But we don't need that big of a separation. Like for the red should probably be tinted more to the violet side to sort of key these together so that they're not so far apart. And one of the ways that you can do that is to glaze it with a layer, or you could do like a overlay layer where you kind of hit everything with that. You could do a darken layer, set down the opacity, and then hit it that way, and that can key it together and sort of add a shadow over the whole thing. Then you can come back with another layer and start adding the light into it. So the same way that we see on some of these, you just want that fill light. Maybe you set a linear dodge layer if you're working in Photoshop. I'm going to set that down so it's not 100%. And then again, I don't want a warm light. The warm light's on that left side. So now I can come in here and add basically a blue, and I can use that to help tell the forms. And I'm just working in the forms. I'm not really working in anything else. I'm just trying to get the basic fill light is from this side, right? And so then you can come back with this and start adding that in. And you might need to change this depending on the surface. Like I need extra blue to kind of tint that properly. So you can approach it that way. Now, some other thoughts just with the layouts and stuff. The snakes, I think, need some work. Right? Those were a little lacking behind. You put the focus where it needed to be, which was the figure, the main character. The snakes are secondary, but now we do need to give a little love to the snakes, ugly as they may be. And so, like, right now, the anatomy doesn't really work. They just kind of come to an end and they've got teeth. So we want to probably look at the anatomy of some actual snakes, serpents, eels, leeches, somebody across that spectrum. And, like, anatomy of the eyes, right now, they're just ovals. They don't feel like they're skin lids, orbits of an eye. They don't feel like there's really a skull under there. So let's just make sure we're paying attention to that. And this area is catching me off down here. We have like this snake sort of doing this thing, and then it just looks like he's getting really fat. And you're sort of just losing what's going on down there on that bottom right corner with the snakies. Yeah. So this is where you need to start paying attention to that. And when you start adding in some anatomy, right? Maybe there's, on a snake, usually there isn't just a perfect tube. There's actually, you know, if you've got like a snake body, there is sort of division between like a top and bottom portion. It doesn't need to be exactly halfway. And you can look to add like little ridges that it sort of bumps out. If you run a contour, it's not a perfect curve. It sort of comes down and then it sort of hits that ridge because there is a skeleton in this thing and it has to support it in such a way. So you can start adding these sorts of things. and consider how it's twisting. And it's not going to be perfect all the way. So, like if there was this bottom angle side, and maybe the side twists, maybe he goes this way, right? And maybe this is doing more of this sort of thing so that it's twisting as it comes around, right? Yeah. Always be looking for it to be twisting somehow, not just bending, but going around the axis. Same thing with this one, that we want to add some sort of ridge to it so that there's kind of a ridge here that maybe comes like this, and it sort of hits that ridge. All right, again, putting a twist to it. So it's always doing that sort of thing. That's what it covers it for me. There's a lot to cover with the image going forwards, but I fully suspect that you can do it and that you probably just didn't have the time. So throw some more time at it and do some variations. Play around with different variations of how you want to light it. I would say, look at the sort of images that we had there as references, go find some more, and then do several different types along that line to see which one you like the most. All right, next up, we've got 3 more. And we'll toss these up here. Seney is up next.
Mm-hmm. I think number 3 is the right one. It's called Final 003. I think that's the one he wants us to look at because he submitted 2.
There were 2 of them. One had more fog, one did not. That was the difference between them.
Okay, good.
I suppose I could read the comments. I had trouble with the stairs and dock because they are curving. I was overwhelmed by all the stuff that needs detail. I think I have a problem finding the right focal points. I try to achieve or enhance those with the fog. Okay. Do you want to lead this one, or you want me to jump in?
I didn't have so much notes on this one. I just thought at first look, it's a very cute shop. You can see it's a shop and it has a great atmosphere all around it. Some things that came to my mind. The first thing that I thought, a fireplace at this spot is a little bit the right corner, yeah. Usually you would have a fireplace also maybe to also warm your house, or not just in the wide open. I was not quite sure about the fireplace. I think for the rendering, what confused me a bit is that there are very sharp edges and then a little bit blotchy, suddenly soft edges in this painting. So the like the window in the middle and the fruits before that are super sharp, and then the roof on the right of that is super soft suddenly, the edge, or a little bit, but at least not as sharp as the one on the left. And also, this happens all around. So there's a sharp spot, there's a soft spot, there's a sharp spot. I wasn't quite sure about that. That was a little bit weird to me. So there's no system to the edges, I'd say. So, And for the values, it was the same. So there is a really, really dark value where the little hut on the right is with the, what are these called in English? Where you have like pickles or something inside of that. So it's very black. And then suddenly very bright around the fireplace, very bright values. So if you turn it to black and white, you'll see that this also doesn't have a pattern. It's like there's some some very dark spots and some very bright spots. But yeah, but that's the only thing that I can complain about. The others I really liked. I like the details, the signs. I like the little turtle tortoise shop owner who's fishing. I like the overall idea of it. So it's just nitpicking from my side.
Yeah, and it is for me too. Overall, very successful image. It's a charming image that I think checks all the boxes of what this challenge was about. So, very good. You implemented the things that we talked about last time. Definitely make it more of a shop feel to it. The roof is a lot better now. I think it's a lot more interesting this way, and the way that you've handled the extra windows going up here, there's a lot better pattern to those. So I think the way that you went about implementing the last feedback was very good. Now it really is to more of the finicky little rendering smaller stuff. No major changes here. So let's talk through it. She is right. The level of rendering / sharpness is fairly broad. And I would recommend going over some of these areas, such as a lot of the wood on this tree and the roofs. Not necessarily more detailed, but just cleaner on the edges particularly. Sort of even it out, because you have some areas that have like this net. This net is really high amount of fine visual detail, and it's a long ways from the rough sketchiness that we see in other areas. So we just trying to want to find a balance between those would be very helpful, visually speaking, just to give it that last polish. With Anna, she was talking about the kind of the disparity between some of the values, that you have really bright values in some areas and really dark values in other areas that should realistically be more lit by the light sources. So let's take a look at an option of something that you can do about that. I'm going to put on I'm going to say a hard light layer. Now, a hard light layer won't move the values as much, but it will move the saturation more and the color more than a linear dodge layer will. So what I want to do is do a little more kind of large value lighting changes. So I want to start thinking of areas as regions in the image rather than individual items. So I'm going to do a hard light layer, and I'm going to pick an orange. I might have to adjust the color a little bit. And then I'm going to use a big soft brush. Oh, no, I need something a bit brighter than that. Maybe a little more to the yellow. Yeah. So like on this window, I want to give more of a everything in the inside of here lit by this window is warmer. And basically all the undersides of stuff is going to be a little warmer and a little brighter in the shop areas, and things on the roof are going to be a little darker and a little cooler. So I'll make another layer, set that to darken, same sort of thing we just did on the other image, set that down about halfway, and then I'm going to pick a darker sort of blue denim color to be my sort of my swamp tone to contrast this against. And I'm going to just glaze that over all the swamp lit parts. Just come up here. Might drop that down just a little bit. Yeah. I take just a moment and do a few more. That's probably close enough. Now I can come back here to my hard light layer, and then I can continue with this sort of approach by, I need a little more orangey than that. A little more orangey, a little bit darker. So like all this area in here, I could brighten this up. I'm going overboard to example it. You need to be more finessey about it. Same thing back in here. Say if we do the same sort of approach. I want this area to be better lit by the doorway and the window. You start seeing the sort of difference that makes, right? From here to that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a very nice contrast also between the cool and the warm. And it makes feel the inside of the shop also much more cozy.
Mm-hmm.
And the swamp is a cool and yeah, a little bit darker place, and the shop is warm and bright, and you want to go there.
Yeah, I'd probably go. I'm adjusting this. See, I'd go. My first pass with this sort of atmospheric would be definitely to the warmer side, like this. All right, so we got more of the warm glow. Then I would come back with another one. Where it might just be normal paint layer, and then I can hit individual areas that might be more reflective and not need to be brighter. It's like this window. I can now come in here and hit some spots with a more pure yellow. Kind of hit those back in here. Same thing with these windows. All right, hit some of these windows a little bit, and then metal things. Like the edge of this bowl, that might be catching more light. That'll be glinting a little bit more. And just for artistic purposes, probably coming in here, just pumping up the color on some of the items in the shop. Don't let them get too saturated by the light glow, right? Doing this sort of thing. And these can all be just bright, attractive colors. Right? This is an illustration. We want to take some, some liberties with it. Yeah. These we might make them a little brighter. In the areas that are more lit. And same thing with like the tops of the desks, the tables and barrels and stuff. Those can all have more of a well-lit sort of thing going on here. Same thing over here, where you have that light sort of spilling out of this window. Maybe the window seal and that thickness around the window could be catching some more light. Tops of items around it could be catching some more light. Maybe the edge of this tent here, the tops of these barrels, maybe the underside of this, and likely the back side of some of your moss and stuff hanging down. Could be catching some light as well on insides of these. You get sort of the backlit little mossy stuff hanging down, and that could go across all your different little windows here. So there is where you start really bringing a bit more life and color to the scene there. Was there anything else I was wanting to go over? A small thing, just kind of with the design, sizes and stuff. I feel like these I feel like these posts in the water for this part back here need to be longer. I mean, I just kind of looking at the size and the perspective, I think these posts need to come down to here. Maybe they were, but it looks like that green is going up too high. I would just make sure that these are visible coming down a bit further. Otherwise, it feels like it's off. We want to make sure that those are kind of coming down closer to that level. It's throwing me off a little bit. Yeah, the design improvement is just really, really nice what you've done with it. That sort of wraps it up for what I thought. It's just taking something good and pushing it even further. It's really not about fixing mistakes. It's just, hey, can we make it more inviting? Can we make it more colorful? Can we give it an even better, richer value scheme? That sort of stuff. Any final thoughts, Anna?
It's a very, very good piece, and I'm looking forward to the rework of it. Please post it, Seney. Please post it in the group.
Yes, please do. Okay, we will turn that one off then. Cool. Now we're to Rafael Matheus. And he says, I'm deeply sorry. I wasn't able to finish it. And the time was more than enough to finish it. He was probably at the pub. You can just hear it in his voice. I had a huge time management issue. My most sincere apologies. Still working on the light, and any tips on how to deal with the water will be welcome. Well, Rafael, I figure we could probably talk about that. And you can see his earlier concept up here. His original value studies. We'll pull up there for anybody that didn't catch the last stream about it. So we had him facing this way, a bit of a different layout. It was also a vertical image. And so I had mentioned maybe moving the weapon further away because his hand was already too close. He moved it away, put a bit more tension on it. And a couple of other things like dealing with the silhouettes and stuff. So you did. You went more to a horizontal scene so that we could get more stretch out of the tension. And played with the silhouette of this front guy. Really, really good shapes going on in these beasties. And the shapes overall are really good. They have lots of volume and really good silhouettes. And that can be a difficult sort of thing to do. Some of the things that were catching me here, just sort of... I'd say, what is the word? The tangent. The tangent lines sort of are catching me where this guy is coming right here and he's like, it's almost like he's caressing the line of the character. In fact, they all are. It's almost like they're all posing to make sure that they're just staying around the character. Like this guy's jaw just stays this distance away from the character. This guy stays this distance away from the character. There's always this little buffer room around them, except for like this one little spot here and right here. So this one I think is the one that really catches me the most with that. And then you also have this reddish shape in the background, which I'm guessing is supposed to be like a rock or something. And then it's curving right around that shape as well. So I'd be looking at moving this guy. I mean, even if you got whatever that layer is and just sort of tilted the layer so it was coming in at a slightly different angle that didn't just mimic the arm and the head, that could make a difference. Yeah. What was one of your thoughts, Anna?
I had 3 things for this painting. Besides color and values, the first thing that really struck me is that we don't see his face. And this is a scene of a hero that is fighting against the evil, and we want to, we as the viewer want to be connecting with that person. And we humans, we need faces. So we want faces everywhere. We see faces even where there are no faces, in clouds and rocks and wherever. We love faces. And it is the focal point. He is the focal point. And this is why I think he needs a face. Also, he has such a good gesture and a good face, a good mimic would just support it, like he's suffocating and looking after that weapon or something. It would just make the whole piece feel more tense and intensive also. And this is the first thing. Maybe he didn't have the time to finish it off. I don't know whether this is already his finished draft or maybe he was going for the face still. But this is the one thing that I'm totally missing. For the colors, this might be personal preference, and Clint, we have your proficient opinion on this, but to me, a villain is not pink, and I would have preferred his second color scheme with a really poisonous green for the creatures. I would have loved to see that, just because it makes me feel uneasy. It's because it's poisonous and he's in danger, but here it feels like he's in a very from the colors, just from the colors, not from the creatures, but he's having a good time with lollipops. This is my personal opinion. This is why I would have gone for a very, very strong color like the green, for example. And for the values, a lot of midtones, push it further, more contrast on him as a focal point. But Clint, I think you can explain it way better than me.
She is right. And I had even made a note here just with the lines on the eyes. I want to be able to see this guy's eyes, if nothing else. Just give me a glint of highlight on the eyes. And if you're going to show me a character's face and you're going to show me them in struggle, I want to connect to them. As a human being, we want to empathize with people in the scene. And if we're not going to be able to see his face, we need to make it really obvious that like, this is some sort of helmet that doesn't even have a glass mask. Like this is a solid front one that just has cameras to see out of. You know, something like that, so that I don't feel like I should even be able to see his face. But if you are going to be able to see his face, then we need to, and we can get a lot of emotion out of that. And you can consider doing, you know, even what they do with the movies, which is, oh, okay, there's a little light strip on the inside of the helmet, right, that does this sort of thing. And so you just sort of get this side light of his face and his features, you know, doing kind of this sort of thing, right? And so you're just having the side view of his head. He probably has one of those spaceman, I forgot what they call them, the sleeve things they put over their head. Anyway, we could do that sort of side light thing on it. That would be helpful. I don't really have as big of a problem with the purple, but it does need to be handled the right way. Green, I think that sort of acid green is inherently more unwelcoming of a color for an environment. But the purple, it does start reading alien to me, which was the idea. You could consider pushing the color a little bit with the creatures so that, you know, it's like their coloring is almost like a poisonous tree frog that has bright coloring, where maybe the ends of the mandibles get this really bright sort of magenta, right? And you get this sort of pop of color right around his mandibles, and maybe their mandible things are actually black, you know? And so you're playing with sort of inversing tropes. And then maybe, you know, he starts getting dark back in here, and you got like the... And so it keeps it in the same value scheme, but you get some blocks of color, and maybe he has different, like, we're not doing eyes, we're doing like some sort of pattern of spots or something that kind of comes down his skin, right? To give a little visual element, sort of doing that. And then maybe he has that coming down his belly or something. But going back to what he said, you know, he's working on the lighting. And, you know, that's not a bad reference. Over here, that left side with the pinks and the violets. Because what that is doing is creating good planes, and that's something that we don't have here. It also has the distinct lighting scheme, and that's something we don't have here. I don't know where the lighting is in this scene, and I don't know where it's coming from. And it's going to be hard to render the scene. Not even, I mean, that's not even realistic, but it has a logical sort of pattern to the way that it's lit. I don't know how this is lit. I don't know why his legs at the bottom are brighter than his torso, because there is no light source down there. So that's sort of throwing me off a little bit. I don't know where you want to put the light. You can do it like that one where he's just silhouetted. That's okay. I think it wouldn't be a bad idea to throw some sort of edge light on him, right? I just need a bright color here. So that he could have some sort of off-camera light over there that is creating a nice... Oh, it's not edge lights. It's a side light. A nice side light kind of coming across here. But we need the planes. The planes here work really well. And the planes here we don't have yet. So we need to really be treating these guys as silhouettes. And that's one of the reasons I was thinking the coloring pattern might be brighter. And then if you use that same sort of color scheme, then that background can just be brighter so that he shows up darker. And I don't think you really need to overcomplicate it. Something like that could work. And just letting that background be an entirely different value. I think the light to dark that they have here really works for your scene as well. With this sort of unnatural light of the light kind of coming up off of what would be the water back there. And maybe this guy's a slightly different color. Maybe he's a different color magenta. Then this is when you start getting the different foreground, midground, background. And that background doesn't need very much definition. You don't need much back there, if anything, besides just, you know, some fog and stuff. And you could have even the lower bodies of, like, this fella sort of drifting a little bit lighter because of the atmospheric down there. And he gets a little darker, you know, as he goes up.
Yeah, I see now. Maybe it was more this overall softness that made it look friendly, like a friendly environment. Maybe not the color. Yeah, because now you have a little bit more sharp edges in there, and if you add a harsher light or something like that, I think it will. It will already solve the problem I had with this. Yeah.
Now, on him, he does need a light to give some sort of roundness to him. He's very flat right now. And so we need like a top-down or side or glow or something going on. You have this orange light on his hood, which throws you to recognize him. It's like, okay, he's got like a red-orange light on the inside that's tinting this, or it's an orange glass. But let's not just have that to be a standalone color. That can be a color that's used throughout his like little bits on his suit. So he's got different little bits that are like orange. And that also wouldn't be a bad idea to make his gun have that same sort of glow so that you make the connection there. And that could even have like a little glow on, different part of it there too. So that you look over and you kind of notice those two. As far as the water, I would make this shadow though down here.
I think his legs are brighter because we were talking about the possibility to have the water glow as a light source. Maybe this is what he was going for.
If so, then it really does need to be more bluish. I mean, and it needs to be brighter. And this needs to be distinctly brighter if it's a light source, which you can definitely do, but we do need to implement that. That needs to be more like this, and then it can be fading back to some sort of violet tone because it's there's a violet light source back there, and give you a really interesting color scheme. We've got this sort of who was it that did lighting like this? Oh, James Gurney in Dinotopia: The World Beneath has a scene of underlit lighting in a cave. If you want to check that out. So it would be something on that lines with the kind of the underlight. And that, of course, needs to be carried out throughout all of the subjects here where they've got downward facing planes are all underlit. And then that top plane can be getting more silhouetted. And you could still have the side light if you wanted that over there too.
I think this example shows really well why the value studies are so important and how to pull them off correctly. Mm-hmm. Because we have now had two versions with the strong top light and now a completely different light source. And I think this is a really central part of a good value study, to have different light sources and play around with them and see what works better. And yeah.
So as far as kind of like, if you're going to go this direction with the water, you can do is put in the reflection of him in here. And then you want to have basically a light and dark sort of pattern. You don't need to get real complicated with it. That sort of goes around him. And you're just doing ripple effects. And they're sort of going in and out of connection, right? As waves do, they sort of break up. And then the dark reflections won't override the light. The light is on the surface. And then where things connect to the water, you're likely to have more of a little ring of highlight there.
Also, don't forget the splashes because he's moving a lot, and the creatures are also moving.
Not a bad idea to have, you got some kind of splashes going on. And you could have even like little waves kind of coming up. And you could have water sort of being splashed around in the air, different motion that's happening, or dripping off of his arms and stuff, because assumably his arms are getting wet too. Yeah. Yeah, that hits my points. yeah, again, another one I want to see what you do with it. And just take your time, this sort of thing. I mean, it doesn't take very long to play out some different ways to handle the water as far as colors and whether it's lit from the side or from the top or the right side or the left side. And what you do is just get a copy like this and then make maybe 6 or 8 of them on a page that are fairly small. And just take 10 or 15 minutes to do, okay, version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4. And then you start looking across them to see which ones you like, which ones are reading well for the direction that you want. Okay, next up is Justus Wilson. He says, I see that I didn't add enough contrast to the characters. They look too light for their surroundings. Any tips you have on creating a landscape that helps pop the subjects would be very helpful. Well, not if you say it in that conniving way. You know what? If you were just a little more excited about it, I might answer that question. So, we will see. We will see. Anna, did you have a chance to take a look at this one?
Yes, of course.
Yep. What'd you think?
So, I really, really like it. I like the style of it and the characters and the idea and how he changed his first sketch to make more sense and storytelling to it. So he really, really took in the critique you gave him and really changed these things, and I really liked that. And what the second thought I had was like, what's with the colors? This might be a style thing for maybe some pop art. I'm not into, I'm not knowing much about that style, to be honest. But for me, the colors made a very terrific scene look like something that you have on your bonbons or something. It's like really, really colorful and joyful colors. So I wasn't quite sure. I kind of like it, but I'm also kind of thinking it's not terrifying if you use these colors. It looks like these candy splash arts from League of Legends. So a little bit more fun things. So I wasn't quite sure about the colors. I like them, but for the scene, I'm not so sure. And I really like the humans in this painting, and I think they're really well drawn. What a little bit threw me off is the body of the serpent. It doesn't make much sense to me where the arms are coming from, and his upper body that is behind his neck, hidden behind his neck. I don't see what's going on there. I don't understand it very well. And also the hand of the serpent that is holding the girl is really not didn't receive as much love as the rest of the painting, I'd say. So it looks like he wants to put further because some parts are really, really rendered well. Others are just like a little bit sketchy. So I assume that this person is going on with it still. These were my first thoughts so far.
Yeah, you have put in a crazy amount of rendering, Justus. There is a lot of time being put into this. And it's coming off well. All right, this sort of thing takes ages. Faces like this take ages. And doing this sort of scale work with the reflections and everything. But it's all coming together, I think, quite well. The colors are they're candy wrapper pop colors, and in this case, I'm going to say that's not a bad thing. What works about this with the colors is that we're all aware of what you're going for. You're not going for realism. You're not even going for consistency. of color scheme. And if you check out my ebook on colors, there are 3 different things that a color scheme can try to do. And it's doing one of 3 things. It is going for harmony, which you'd get from like an analogous color scheme, very similar colors. It can go for contrast, which would be like a split color scheme, or orange and violet, or red and green, or something like that. Or you can just go for colorfulness. And that's what we've got right here. And it's the sort of thing that you see in old comic books and old sci-fi book covers. So because that is what you're going for and you're aware of that, I'm fine with it. Now, you'd mentioned that you felt like the contrast was maybe a little low on your characters. It doesn't really strike me off because of the style, but I also would not have a problem if you ramped up some of the darkness, like over here on her, and got that a bit deeper, and then maybe deepened some of the shadows going on with some of this. And
I also put it on black and white in my Photoshop, and I also saw that this is all in the mid-tone grayish. But the colors are so strong. This is why you don't. So often it helps me while painting to turn on the black and white to see, look only at my values to check whether they're working like that.
Yeah. So like this sort of pulp sci-fi, their values on the colors they were not very advanced. Most of them weren't that good to begin with, and if you actually do them correctly, they look wrong. So you're trying to, again, ride that line between, you want it to look good, but you can't fix the mistakes that they would normally have, otherwise it doesn't fit what you're actually going for. Okay, let's talk about some of the things that's sort of taken away from the image, that's not in that artistic style sort of thing. This creature is off. Like, the head's fine. I'm good with that. Cool. I like the way it's looping around him, going around his neck. Cool. I think it's weird that he has a staff, but I kind of like it. The thing that does get me is just the spatial way his neck works and the anatomy of his upper body. So there is, let me grab it. Yeah. There is this much space in between him and that creature. And I get the idea that his upper body is leaning back. So his upper body might be to about there if you ran a line down. Somewhere right in this region. But we've got this much neck to cover this much distance. And maybe you're trying to get this thing to be like a lot closer to the camera, but I just feel like it's not that close. And that's a really hard thing to tell visually, is how far or how close things are in space if they're not interacting with something else. Instinctively, I feel like his head is just past where the guy is, which makes his neck seem really long and not be able to fit within that area. The other thing is, the body anatomy back here, because you've got Mr. Neck here, who's just a cylinder coming down. And then you have a shoulder right here, but the other shoulder is way over here. So I'm not sure how that works. And the arm is like really short. So this feels off to me. Like I'd probably change this so that the upper body, like maybe the staff, and that's kind of like the other thing is like I feel like he's reaching to put his hand in front of his body, even though this arm should be back behind the body. I would expect the staff to be on the other side of the body, not in the front over here. So some of that spatial thing is just like, I don't think that should be where that is. Now, you had mentioned with the background writing in down here, Justice, that you weren't real happy with the background, creating a landscape that helps pop the subjects. So we do need to try to address that a little bit. And yeah, right now, these aren't really doing much. Maybe what the simplest answer to do is just put them on the ledge of some sort of cliff like this. And that can even add to the danger of like, oh, there's a cliff edge right there. And then you allow this to essentially just be space out here, and you have some stars. And that way you've got a nice black background for all of these bright colors and shapes to be standing out against. And it doesn't even need to be that much. I mean, you don't need to utilize it a lot other than the fact that it's being utilized to pull them out visually. This snake hand up here, I also was kind of thinking the same thing. It feels less like a hand and more like a sucker. If we want the, okay, I'm gripping your helmet thing, then think about your hand doing that. And we want to see more joint action with this sort of thing going on. Because it's obviously very hand-like. We can look at this creature's other hand over there, and we want to do that sort of thing with the joints bending to go up and go around this. And then we can show the ends of the talons or whatever going into the metal. They've actually torn a hole through pieces of the metal, and the ends are into it. That would be nice. Yeah, if you have like a planet, what you might think about is like, okay, we put space behind him, and then we have one major sort of planet behind your main character, sort of being there, and then maybe you put a ring around that character, that sort of area, and you just have some random like stars and stuff. Keeping it fairly simple so that the foreground can read out. Yeah. Yeah, with her, she's really, really blue. Him, we've got some things to break that up. So I'd say, can we borrow some of the black stuff going on in his suit to break this up? Just a couple little bands of like that black going right there by her shoulder would kind of break that up. And then maybe she has a collar or something on the bottom of this right before the joint or on either side of that joint. Again, just to break up that blue could be nice. Or whatever this sort of symbol thing is on his chest. Maybe that's a little logo on her shoulder. And we just play that same little thing going on over here. All right. Doing this sort of thing. Any thoughts, Anna?
I'm thinking about the perspective. We are above her, and she is kind of being taken away, also up from him. This is correct, right? This is the way I see it. So she's taken by the creature, like lifted or something to somewhere, and we are even above that. And with that horizon that we see, it would mean that we are standing on a very, in comparison, a very small rock or something, like an asteroid, not a planet. Am I right? Okay.
Well, I don't really take that we're looking down on her. I feel like that our eye level is right about his eye level. I think we're somewhere around here. So we're looking, yeah, I think our eye level's right about there. So this would be a hill back here. I don't know what this is. We kind of need to get rid of this. That doesn't make a lot of sense, whatever that big rock thing is. Unless you want to do just generic sort of alien spike rock background. I mean, you can do that too. And then that would sort of make sense of why this big rock is here. And we can also have one like over here too, a little bit more towards the foreground. Yeah. Just have some jutting off. Like that. Yeah, I think this is even one that you almost don't even need realistic perspective.
Yeah, I was just wondering because he might even put out the planets in the background and just have like Earth or ground in the background because we are looking down so much. But when you say we have a different eye level, I'm not so good with perspective things. It's just the way I felt. So he doesn't need this the space as background. It could be just ground. But I think it works either way.
Yeah, it does, because you're not necessarily trying to go by the rule book of realism. It's stylized in a interesting sort of retro style. Yeah. Okay, well, enough on that. We
very
got
cool.
more stuff to go on. I appreciate the entry, Justus. I'm really liking it. I think it's a really fun image. Oh no, we already looked at Seney's other one. Okay, I'm going to open these two.
Okay.
This one is coming in by W. Do you want to pronounce that name? I don't know how to pronounce
I think
that.
Wojtek. I might be wrong too. Wojtek?
Is that, yeah, we'll go with that. He says, I decided to redesign the scene, and I tried to make a pose more dynamic. I wanted to make my weapons glow the most, but I also have to put a lot of other light sources. Therefore, I'm afraid that there's too much contrast. Also, painting the hair and skin in this light was really difficult for me. So, because he's an anime character, we will do what we can here. All right. Big improvement, I think, from the old image. We see the value study up here of where we were, and he was in this sort of just fixed pose, shooting a blast, and we wanted to try to get more out of it. We wanted more of a movement in it, more like the fight was ensuing and he wasn't just kind of standing there taking it. Anna and I both thought that the kind of green glow on the snakes was nice, and then that was something that should have been added in. And so you've implemented that, and that's good to see. But yeah, the lighting has kind of gone a good direction, but we also need to refine it a little bit because the purple is sort of going a little off. Okay, so what were your thoughts here, Anna?
I also thought it's an improvement. When I first opened the painting, I was like, why is he sitting there in that weird pose? And then I think he's jumping. Am I right? I think he's supposed to be jumping.
But I'm with you. It's not real clear. I wasn't sure if he was sitting down or whether he was in the air.
Yeah, so I think the background decision he made here is probably the biggest problem, because on one hand it's the same value, on the other hand it's very detailed, and also it is creating a tangent with the character, so it's directly around his legs. So it was looking like he's sitting on top of a hill or something like that. And I think if we made a change to that, it would become more clear that he's jumping, and also his silhouette would read much better.
Yeah, let's look at a couple of options of doing that. And I think atmospherics is going to be probably your best choice here for the artist. Even looking at your two style directions, that they both really implement this to a high degree, and you show more of that in your color studies here, and you actually went away from that quite a lot, and I think you're missing that opportunity. I would say go that way. So I'm set up a linear dodge layer at about 50%. And same sort of thing that we just did with the little hut shop of adding some of the glow to create the more regions. And that's what we want to do. This one, that I'm going to pick maybe some, color there. Then I'm going to use a big soft brush, and I want to start putting in a little atmospheric glow. Just fog or something. And then I can throw a mask on that. Pull this over here, maybe you can see that. I throw a mask on that, and then anything that I paint with black on that layer is going to just go away. It won't be erased. It will just be hidden. So what I want to do is create a little more plane definition, because right now, like Anna said, everything is just sort of sitting on that same plane because it all has the same value. And then I can also put him onto a different plane. Now, what I'm trying to do is separate both the foreground and the character from the light source. From each other. I can ramp this up a bit more. Yeah. And you see, just right there, very quickly, we can separate the character from the background. I soften it right there, just so that the two blacks of those two different layers, different planes in the image, aren't running into each other. And then I have another one set back here that's a linear dodge layer, and I'll do essentially the same thing on it. And we'll get another soft layer, soft brush. And you can have all that glow back there on yours. I see that. I do like he's got purple, and then the environment has more of the cool tones, like you see on these illustrations here as well. So if we pick a kind of a cyan color, see, like they're using a side light on, I forgot her name, in order to really bring out that side, because they didn't want to brighten the background up a lot. So you could do it that way, or you can use the background to light it and no side light like you have on the one here on the right. Neither one is particularly right or wrong, but I do want to separate some of the darkness so it's not just all even. Okay, now I go back to my layers and I want to paint in the black so that not everything is going to be having that glow from it. And this is where we can start pulling out some of the forms of these back snake dudes. Now, you also might want to change the shape of the mound behind him, because it really mimics the exact curve of his legs, which is odd. And it's just one of those visual tangents that isn't going to help anything. And we want to try to avoid if we can. So that's with those two together. Just trying to help separate the planes some. And we could span the colors out a little bit like that if we wanted to. And if you don't like it, if you think it's too much or too little, again, you just go back in with your white or your black, and you can tone it whichever direction you want, more or less, without having to worry about all the edges and doing those. Okay, so once you got to that point, where would you take it from here? What would you suggest, Anna? And you still there? Okay, maybe she had to get up for a second. So now we could think about putting in maybe a shadow in order to, again, help try to just sell the fact that he is jumping. We could do this sort of thing, that almost like the light from his gun is allowing there to be a shadow sort of cast on the ground to help sell that. Yeah, kind of across there like this. This arm, I'm losing a little bit, kind of just the detail of it. Okay, looks like we had a failure with Skype. One moment. I'll just get, we need to get this situated real quick. Let me pull up Skype here. Hey, you there? Oh, ran out of battery. Okay. All right, so if she can get power back to her machine, we'll see here. Hey. Okay.
I'm trying to set up my PC again, but it might take a little bit to repair, you know, when Microsoft repairing
Okay.
all this. Sorry.
All right, well, we'll give you a minute, and I'll just kind of keep going on it. You let me know when it's set up and it's doing good.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an old laptop. I'm sorry.
I need to go back to this one. Here we go. Okay. Little technical difficulty there. So this arm is throwing me off a little bit. I think you have like the gun sideways, which is really giving me a profile that I can't read very well. So consider tilting the gun at an angle that I get a little better gun profile to it, so I can sort of read that visually. Yeah, we can turn down some of the lights on the body. It's like we see on here. I should know her name. I can't think of it. Anyway, that you have light and you have color on this League of Legends character, but the strongest light are on the sources themselves, and the secondary amount of light is across the body, where right now we have just as strong a light on the body as you do from the actual light sources. So I would want to see these toned down, and you can still have a good saturated color on them, but they shouldn't be as bright. And so we can take those down a little bit, and don't be afraid of letting them be a bit darker. Like down here, this could go more silhouetted. And then this sort of thing, you know, if we want to add this sort of light source to the side of it, then we can help tell the form of some of the things going on here by having that light source over there. And now we have kind of a side-to-side light source, similar to what you see on her. But notice that this light source over here is a much weaker. So that side light from the environment could be a lot stronger than the side light from the weapon itself is secondary to the brightness of this thing. Although right around this gun, you could have a lot of pop. You know, you could have more color around this. There might even be like little spits of flare or something coming out of it. Could be cool. Now with the background shape, we could consider changing up so it doesn't mimic his pose and having a visible change to this so we can read his silhouette and that he's off the ground there. So it could be something more like that. It's kind of coming down here, then it's running into these rocks. Would help kind of break that pattern up a little bit. And if we want to ramp it up even more, see they've used a really nice compositional element here on the reference of having this curve with the fog, and then this curve with this, and then this curve up here. And so this is a really nice pattern. Here we just have everything kind of sideways. So what we can think about is trying to create a sort of curve in a very similar way where these guys are doing more like this. They're starting to really come up around, and they're all starting to fall somewhere across that curve. Yeah. Or you could even have some sort of pattern very similar to that one, which is there is some sort of structure or design or erosion pattern in this particular location where the stalagmites or walls or whatever kind of form in these parts where it kind of comes up and then it starts coming in at a certain level. All right, and then that way it just creates a more dynamic background instead of just sort of a flat tone back there. All right, really cool stuff going on here. Much better action on this one, better use of colors on this one. Or say good use of the colors of the sort of two-tone back and forth, but particularly look at making planes in the image, separating those out so that the character is off the ground, and watch going too heavy with the bounce light. The bounce light should never be as bright as the light source itself. All right, let's close that. Last one we're taking a look at is Tyler Vale. Tyler says, I really don't like how this one is coming out. We've all been there, Tyler. We know. I wanted to get some feedback before I kept going on it, though. Thank you. Okay, so this is another one where the character was in a sort of just passive scene and there was some stuff around them. And I talked about, okay, what if we had him more in motion instead of just standing there? And this is another one where it's like, this value scheme's really working. Why don't we use that? Ooh, I'm not sure the choice there. It's like even in thumbnail, this works. I mean, when I get it way back here and that still works. I read the planet, I read his silhouette, I read the ground, I read those guys, and I don't need any detail or any color to understand what's going on there. But yet, this one, it's not that strong. It's not as good of a values scheme. So make sure that you always have a good values study that you've done that you like, that is going to be serving as your proof of direction, right? Of what you're trying to do. The text, it should work without the text. Okay, so I understand that the text is on here and you're kind of treating it like a book cover, but it should be able to stand without it. We don't necessarily need the text on there to get the idea that it's a book cover. Okay. Now, here is a place where two things need to happen. More value studies and more color studies. And until you have an idea of what you're doing with both of those, you're really going to be hitting a wall with the progression of the image. So values down here is really getting lost, because this is another one. If you desaturate it, that's not what I meant to do. If you desaturate it, you practically lose everything below that ground line. Everything under here is basically lost. You can't see any of that. Then his values are working kind of, because they are like, this is the same value as that background. This stands out okay, but then we have like high contrast on his face. So make sure that we know what we're doing with the value schemes, and then make sure you know what you're doing with the color scheme, which I think you threw in some colors, but you didn't really have anything going with it. On this one, since it's reading well, and say, okay, I like this. I think this is working well as a thumbnail. Now, how do I expand this out? What you're wanting to think about is keeping the blocks of value. So overall, he needs to be a silhouette. Overall, this needs to be kind of silhouetted. So you think of the value scheme, and then you expand out each of them into 3 tones or 2 tones, depending on the subject and stuff. So like on this one, this is the base value. Okay, cool. Now I can't really go darker than that. That's pretty much black. So I could go like 1/3 of a step lighter. Then I could go slightly lighter than that. Then I have 3 values now that I can use on this creature. And that way that I can render and develop form on this creature without breaking the overall value scheme. Same thing for him. After you find one that you like, okay, this is his value. Now I need to make a value that is slightly darker. And I need to find the value that is slightly lighter. All right, now I can use those 3 value schemes on him. Those different levels. And I need to be able to develop everything on him in those 3 values so that it never gets too light or too dark to, again, break the overall scene. You're also looking for silhouettes. This is the time when you want to look for silhouettes. So you can come down here and say, oh, you know what would really help the silhouette? If we had some more teeth. What would help the silhouette is if I could really get the end of that rocket right there. And if that rocket could show up a little bit better because that background was brighter. Yeah, that would be even better. Then his silhouette's working okay. Okay, cool. Now you have more of this. And the same thing with this planet. Like, you think about it in 3 tones, and then you think about this rocket in 3 tones. And every time you're just doing, okay, well, this is the rocket's color, then you go a little bit lighter than that, and then you pick one that's a little bit darker than that, and then you paint it in that one. And, if you do that, and you say, okay, well, it has this sort of reflection, kind of chromeness there, and maybe the top is catching a bit of light across here. Then there's the basic value sort of in the middle. And the bounce light sort of coming down the middle part there. Okay, cool. Now we've done enough work to sort of develop that, and it hasn't changed the overall value scheme. Each one is sitting within its family. In the same way that you would have an analogous color scheme of, okay, well, I can have, let's say, analogous color scheme, you know, I'm going to have this green over to this blue over to this green. They're all similar enough that they basically sit in the same family, and that'll work, but we have to do the same thing with the values as well. Okay, other things. The way that this leg is coming straight at us is a little weird. That's kind of throwing me off. I was kind of trying to tell from this. I feel like I'm getting more of the bend here, and then it's sort of not here anymore. When possible, try to use overlapping to create depth. Like you could consider actually having, you know, this leg in front, and then maybe that leg is in the background. All right. Otherwise, when legs and elbows and things are coming straight at the camera, you don't get a very good sense of depth to it, and it's hard to read the joints, especially from a thumbnail. And it almost looks like his leg's just short. So you have to really be telling the way that the leg is bending. And I kind of expect this leg to actually be doing more of that. And then it's going backwards, like if you were to be looking at the doing this, and then he's got and I can see more bend if it's doing something that way. Or if people are falling, sometimes their legs go up. Like this leg could even be doing more of that, where that leg is down. Or I would check your reference to see if it's possible to maybe turn his knee a little bit one way or the other, so that it's not just sort of sideways to us. Now, this is another place where you could pay attention to the reference, and that you've got some good things going on in the reference. Over here, I'm getting a lot of form, a very clear light and shadow pattern going on in that photo. And maybe you didn't set the photo up in order to be accurate with the lighting, but that's not a bad shadow pattern to read across the forms. But over here, you've just gone generic with it. You've just done that generic front light that doesn't really have any form to it. It doesn't have any really anything to it. Everything's just sort of flat. And the suit itself, we could probably be getting more interest out of it. I'm going to grab your reference here, because there's a lot of good reference. Oh, wrong layer. A lot of good reference in this, but we kind of need to look at how to get more out of it. What information is good here? So the whole face. Okay, let's say take it down a little bit. Just put it in shadow to begin with. I'll just grab that. I'm not going to be real picky with the colors at the moment. And then we're looking at establishing the planes. The initial pass should just be to try to bring out the volume of what is going on. And I'm looking at developing the volume of the cheeks and the different planes of the face. I'm just using the same color because I don't really care about it right now. And sort of just with this, you can almost immediately get a sense of the volume of the head. And then we've got to watch some of these other angles and the way that the suit is working across the body. We have a lot of this going on here. And watch how far out that shoulder has to be. And we've got to have the curve of the body. What is the body doing? Right? We talked about that angle, not the angle, the line of action. And the line of action here is kind of wobbly. Right? We want a clean line of action. So that's why I'm feeling like maybe this leg could almost be straight. And this one could be bent. And then we could get more of that. Or we need to arch his chest more. That might be the easier thing, is if we have his chest up, and then that sort of leads into the leg. Anyway, you would have to work out that leg. That whole hip would be moving over. But at least that would sort of keep this line of action going on there. Then always think about like the thickness of the material. It's like this is arching up. But we obviously see that that is a place that you're going to get more of this sort of curve going on. So we got to take cues from that. And then that's got to go around that shoulder. So make sure that we have plenty of these shapes and help that silhouette read a little bit better. And this is going to have folds in it too. I mean, he's crunching his arms together. You're going to get folds there across the chest. Even if it is a fancy spacesuit, right? We're going to get some folds doing this sort of thing. And this here too, right? It's got to have enough extra fabric here that we can get some folds across this area. Same thing here. Going to have some of these guys going on, compression folds, especially around the joints. And this is probably going to be a little more arched up. Get some more chest in there. Another place might look at having a little fold there. Because right now it's more like just red skin, right? There's no sort of fold patterns. And look how much fold you would get here. Yeah, we'd have some folds doing this sort of thing. And then trying to get some cast shadows going on, some basic lighting going on here. And the same lighting that's working on his head needs to be working across this stuff too. I'm just kind of looking at where that shadow's falling across there. And usually, unless you need the legs to really be telling you something, you can probably just let them go to more light, you know, hitting that upper body there. Do you have a website to buy your Photoshop swatches? No, Photoshop's from Adobe. You can rent it. For stretchy pants like that, I would honestly want to have to go take a look. I'm not sure how the folds would work. I think this leg is in front, so you'd probably have like a fold doing this, and then it's probably coming across here, but you're likely also going to have some sort of seam pattern across here somewhere. This sort of thing. Yeah, get a reference on that one. I'm not necessarily going to be good enough to spit that ball that accurate enough for you. Down here, any place that you're going to have a joint like this where the leg is bending, where the arm is bending, these are fairly straight. But you're going to have some fold patterns in here. Right? They're going to have to be compressing because the joint is there. And he's bending that joint. So that excess fabric has to go somewhere. It has to wiggle around up and down to work out the excess. Now, not so much on the top, because the top is the long side. It's the short side that you're going to get most of the folds on. Now then we can look at adding probably a bit more shine to, yeah, it's going off at that angle. Some of these items, this fancy gear can have a little detail on them. So there you go. That's sort of how you can get a bit more out of that. I would be going probably more of this background you have with it. You do have like this old space cadet image here and this old sci-fi image here, but you notice that they have a lot more pop of value with that sort of style. So with this background, I'm looking at how much color they have here, how much value they have here. I mean, this is just like black sky down to a glow on the horizon. I mean, that's not a bad option. I don't know that I would go black. If you want to stick to more of the value scheme that you have on that other image, then you could do like a green down, you know, I'm just using the same color here to kind of keep it simple. Green down to this sort of yellow glow across the horizon. And then your planet is kind of doing that same thing where it has the yellow glow, you know, back behind him. And then it's sort of just fading into that green. And then you can do your rings. And you can play around with like how contrasty you want that to be. Yeah. And if you can shift that color, I don't know that that's really working super well for you, this scene. I feel like that's probably closer. And then you got his bright red against basically all these sort of green tones. Yeah, I mean, that's working pretty well on that one. I'll do the same thing here. This ship needs to stand out a lot more. You could do similar to what you see on that actual rock back there, where this could be really bright, as if that's catching some light. Then that underside is actually quite dark, similar to what you have. But I think we really need to have some light back here, like that's sitting up on some sort of rock pillar, so that we can have that silhouette of the ship and the silhouette of these serpent guys right back there. Anna, are you still here?
Yes, I'm still
Okay.
there.
So I've yapped away for a while. What's your thoughts? Where's that?
Yeah, on him you covered pretty much everything. I also had jotted down. Just for an iteration idea, he is now jumping backwards, I guess. And when he's landing, it's a little bit hard for him, probably. So just if he wanted to have this upper body, but with a little bit different lower body, I'd suggest to go for some Lucian fan art from League of Legends.
Mm-hmm.
There you see, for example, the Project Lucian skin. There he's jumping sideways and shooting backwards. So This is how he can still land on his feet and still shooting backwards, just as an iteration idea. And one more thing, but it's probably a tiny thing or not so important thing, is the creature on the left is facing him very. We see the creature completely from the side. And I
Yes.
think it would be cooler if it is a little bit more tilted so that it's more facing him. I think that's a problem that we all have when we are painting, because when we see everything directly from the side or directly from the front, and these tilts and so on. I think this could just push it a little bit to the next level, to have the creatures not directly from the top, directly from the side, directly from the front. Tilt the head a little bit. But I think just a small thing.
Yeah, on that head, you've got to box something like that if you were to put it in a box where we're seeing the inside of the jaw on that left, in the far side of the jaw a little bit. It's offset a little bit. But that's not where he is. So we need to change that box so that it's more like this. And you've got, this is no distortion, right? What we're looking for more is this sort of thing where he's going away and the head is turned more at that sort of angle so that he's properly looking at that guy. And if it helps, you can just draw a box like that and put it over the head to help sort of orient your mind with what it's needing to do. Now, we kind of talked about like the values down here. And again, like this is another one where you need to think about how this, if you think about the jaw opening kind of like that, how this is sitting in a volume, and where, like, okay, the teeth are coming down here. That means that the other teeth need to be about here, but the teeth don't always line up exactly right? You wouldn't be able to close your mouth. So that tooth needs to be probably on the underside towards the middle, on the top side towards the outside. And now I have a better idea of how this works together, right? And now that works with the volume of the head, and it lines up. The same sort of thing over here.
And the 3D model you mentioned earlier could totally help with that. If you have a problem thinking about it by yourself.
Yeah, this site here, getting somebody like this, there's serpent, snakes, all kinds of different heads, and just getting it in a similar position to what you want can really help you kind of work out how to sketch it. Because, I mean, honestly, most of us, we don't have a dragon head model that we can literally pick up and take a look at. So these can be excellent resources for working out that sort of thing. I think that's all I had here. Oh. So, if you want to jump in the next challenge, the Spring/Dragon's Den challenge, tickets will go on sale tomorrow, 6 of them in the morning, 6 of them in the evening, and there will be 12 of them, and you're welcome to join in there. And then Monday, I will be streaming again over on Twitch. It's not as, I don't do portfolio reviews. I'm not even doing digital art out there. But welcome to stop by in the morning, do a little sketching with me, and just hang out. So, any last thoughts that you want to give anyone? Or have I forgotten anything, Anna?
Well, like and subscribe.
Yes. If you've enjoyed this, if you found the channel fun or beneficial, please leave a like. Leave a comment of what you would like to do in a future challenge, or what you'd like to see other people do. That can be fun too. And I will add it to the list. So next week we should be streaming again. That will likely be a portfolio review episode, because it'll be 2 weeks before we see concepts for the new challenge. So thank you so much for joining us. And from me, appreciate you joining. And I guess we will see you next week. Otherwise, come by the Swatches group on Facebook, and you can catch us out there. So, goodbye, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, see you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh, yeah. Tell you see you next time. Keep drawing.